So how can something totally change, yet somehow claim to be the exact same thing? It's a bit of a paradox, right? And it sits right at the heart of so many long-standing institutions. Today, we're going to dive into a classic theological argument that tackles this very question to redefine the identity of the church itself, unpacking how it can be seen as one single, continuous story even through massive, massive transformations. And really, it all boils down to this one huge question. When a divine promise is made to someone and their descendants, who are the real heirs? Is it all about the bloodline, the physical family tree? Or is it about something else, like sharing the same faith? This wasn't just some abstract idea. It was a point of serious, real-world conflict.
Okay, so the argument we're exploring kicks off by claiming this whole dispute comes from what the author calls a woeful and fatal mistake. The basic idea is that a huge misunderstanding of Old Testament promises created this massive clash of expectations.
And this was the foundational claim. For a lot of people back then, this sentence was everything. It wasn't just about ancestry. They saw it as a golden ticket, a direct claim to all of God's promises. The perspective we're looking at says this is the very belief that needed a closer look.
And according to this view, this is exactly where the trouble began. The assumption was if you're a physical descendant of Abraham, you automatically get to inherit every single promise. So you can imagine the confusion and anger when things didn't pan out that way, when outsiders were suddenly welcomed in, and some insiders, well, they weren't.
To untangle this whole mess, the argument goes way, way back to the beginning, to the covenant, or the foundational agreement made with Abraham. And the key to understanding all of it, from this viewpoint, is getting a clear picture of what was actually promised in the first place.
Believe it or not, the entire argument really hinges on the number 2. The idea is that the covenant with Abraham actually came with 2 totally distinct privileges, and understanding the difference between these two is presented as the absolutely crucial first step.
And the breakdown is actually pretty simple, but it's profound. So on one hand, you've got the privilege of the flesh. Abraham was chosen to be the physical ancestor of the Messiah, but, and this is key, this role is framed as temporary. It had an expiration date. Then, on the other hand, you have the privilege of faith. Abraham's own belief was meant to be the model, the pattern for every believer who would ever come after him. And this is presented as the permanent, enduring part of the deal.
So it just makes sense, right? If you have 2 different privileges, that leads directly to the next critical distinction the text makes, the idea that Abraham had 2 different kinds of descendants, or seed. So if we follow this logic, you've got the seed of the flesh, that's the physical bloodline, set apart for that temporary job. But then you have the seed of the promise, and this refers to spiritual descendants. This group includes anyone, from any background, who shares that one defining thing Abraham had, faith. According to this argument, that's the lineage that truly matters in the long run.
This little table really helps make it concrete. So look at Isaac and Jacob. They're in both columns. Yes, they were physical descendants, and they shared the faith. But then you have descendants who were part of the bloodline but didn't have faith. They're only in the flesh column. And then, and this is the game changer, you have believing Gentiles. These are folks from completely outside that original heritage. They have zero physical connection, but their shared faith makes them part of the seed of the promise.
So what's the upshot of all this? What does it actually mean for the identity of the church? Well, this is where the text brings in a really powerful metaphor to explain how the church could change so dramatically and yet somehow stay the same. And here is the absolute core of the argument. At the coming of the Messiah, one church wasn't just torn down and a new one built from scratch. No, the original church continued, but its membership was now clearly and completely defined by faith, not by heritage.
This is the image that ties it all together. The church is like an olive tree. It's one, single, continuous living thing. Some branches, those who were descendants by blood but not by faith, were broken off. And new branches, that's the believers from all nations, were grafted right in. But the tree itself, the church, founded on faith in the promise, it stayed the same.
And look, this perspective isn't trying to downplay the changes. I mean, they were huge. That special status based on lineage, it was over. The old rituals, the established ways of worship, they ceased. New ones were put in place. And Gentiles were brought in as total equals. But in this view, none of that changed the basic identity of the tree itself, that one continuous community of faith.
So let's bring it all home. What is the big final takeaway here? Well, this whole argument is really designed to do one thing: to shift the defining feature of the community away from heritage and put it squarely on faith. And here it is, the ultimate definition this entire argument has been building towards. The church is the community of Abraham's children, by faith. Your bloodline, your ancestry, it becomes irrelevant. If you share the faith, you are part of that one continuous story, and all the promises belong to that community.
All right, let's just quickly retrace the logic one more time so it's crystal clear. Step 1. It all starts with a big fight over who gets the promises. Step 2. The solution is to identify two different privileges. One is temporary and based on flesh. The other is permanent and based on faith. Step 3. That logically leads to two kinds of descendants. And the final conclusions, Step 4, the true, ongoing church is defined by that spiritual line of faith. Simple as that.
So when you boil it all down, the takeaway from this classic text is a pretty radical redefinition of what it means to belong. It's arguing that the promises aren't tied to a people defined by their DNA, but to a community defined by what they believe. The identity of the church becomes a spiritual reality, not an ethic one.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating question, one that echoes way beyond theology, doesn't it? For any group, any nation, any community, what's the stronger glue that holds it together? Is it a shared past and a common heritage? Or is it a shared set of beliefs and convictions about the future? Definitely something to think about.